Now first, I'm going to take a look at a prismatic part, and as you can tell, the part that I currently have loaded in here has all of the programming workflow defined, all the machining operations that are already programmed in here. So folks, you're probably familiar with, programming your machining operations. So what we're going to do is take it to the next level where all of the effort and the work that you have put in to program your toolpaths are now saved with this current part. So we would like to reutilize these operations that you programmed on other part files or family of parts or parts that could be similar that would require a similar workflow of machining operations. So we could save the entire workflow of your programming sequence of these operations that you currently have programmed on a file to a knowledge base. So what is a knowledge base? A knowledge base contains information about each of the parameters that you have programmed in the operation. So for example, if you take a look at the pocket operation, the information about your tool, your feeds and speeds, your clearance definition, your cut parameters, cut levels, entry exit, advanced parameter sorting, all of the information except your machining geometry, which is your control geometry. It could be a part or containment region. So all of the information except the control geometry will be saved to a knowledge base. So after you have your parts programmed, you just have to do one additional step to save these operations to a file. We call it saving to a knowledge base. And this can be done from the Program tab. You would go over to Knowledge Base, and you'll find Save to KB. So KB refers to knowledge base. This is the abbreviated form for knowledge base. So you would select Save to KB, and this will save all of the operations that you programmed, including your machine setup, which is the machine definition, and the post-processor name as well, in addition to the operations that you program to a knowledge base. So in addition to saving your file, we're also going to save these operations to a knowledge base by selecting Save to KB, and then you can choose a folder where you would like to have this saved. So I'm going to save this to the data folder, which is the default location in here, and I'm going to pick Save and save it up. So now I have this saved to a knowledge base. Now let's go ahead and open up another part which needs to be programmed, and that would require a similar workflow of machining operations in here. So I've just loaded up another part, and on this part you will notice that there are similar type of features. We have pockets, we have holes, we need to program some of these chamfers, and also we would need to mill these holes and also profile cut around this. Now the previous example that we looked at also requires the same, had the same set of machining operations. So rather than having to go ahead and program the entire workflow by selecting the machining operations, by clicking through each of these menus, as we save the entire workflow of operations to the knowledge base, we're now going to go ahead and find that knowledge base and load it onto this particular part. So to do that, I'm going to go over to Knowledge Bases and then select Load Knowledge Base. So selecting the knowledge base will allow me to load the template of these machining operations which we had just saved, and I'm going to select the file we just saved, which is Pockets Part 1, and I'm going to click Open. Now you'll now notice that the entire workflow of your operations have been loaded, that you saved to the knowledge base from the previous file are now imported into this particular file. So you could take a look at each of these operations. So we're going to edit them by double-clicking on the pocket operation. You will notice that except your control geometry, all of the other parameters like your tool, feeds and speeds, your clearance, your cutting parameters, your cut levels, entry and exit, advanced cut parameters, and sorting information, they're all being loaded from the knowledge base. So this saves you significant amount of time having to key in these parameters on each and every file that you're going to be programming. Now all I got to do is go ahead and select these part regions, which is the control geometry, after loading the knowledge base. I'm going to use select curve edge regions. And in this particular step, I would like to select the geometry. So I'm going to pick the geometries in here. So I would like to pocket each of these pocket features on the model. So I'm going to select these curve edge regions from the model, right-click or press Enter, and then select Generate. So I would now have to go through making the selections for each of these operations in here. So I'm going to double-click on the profile, use Select Curve Edge Regions. Now in this particular step, rather than having to individually select each of these curves, I could take advantage of some of the selection methods that are available in the CAD system. In this particular case, I'm using CAMJam, so I could use select objects by color, or I could just select objects by layer. So I'm going to use select objects by color, and I'm going to select the geometry that's red in color here, which is these curves. And now you'll notice that all of these curves that are applied, or which have the same color properties are being selected. I'm going to right-click on it and then pick Generate. Now I'm going to repeat the same workflow in here for the whole pocketing operation. So I'm going to go ahead and select the geometries for the whole pocketing operations. I could do select by layer, or I could do select by color. I could use different selection techniques, or I could even individually select each of these geometries in here from the parts. I could be selecting at the top edge or at the floor of the part, and right-click to accept my selections and generate it. Now finally, I'm going to do the chamfer operations, and I will use select curve edge regions, use the layer selection in here, and pick all objects on a specific layer, right-click, generate. And the last operation would be the profile operation. I'm going to use select curve edge regions again, select the curve on the edge of the part, and pick generate. Now there's a couple of things I would like to point out in here. Now if you take a look at these pockets, the pockets that we have in here are not all of the pockets that have the same depth on it. So we are taking advantage of the determine using 3D model to detect depth in the profiling and pocketing operation. And this information was saved in the knowledge base. Now the previous part we programmed had different depths on each of these pockets, and this part as well has different depths. So by using use 3D model to detect depth, CAM can automatically detect the depth from the 3D model. So CAM or Visual Cam for SOLIDWORKS, whichever CAM module that you're working with. Now the depth per cut parameter is also defined in the knowledge base. So I didn't have to go through to tweak any of these parameters in the, that I loaded from the knowledge base. So all of this information is automatically pulled in from the knowledge base. So that saves you significant amount of time having to go through determining the depth or having to split these up into multiple operations because the pockets are of different depths. So we could accomplish all of this in one operation by taking advantage of use 3D model to detect depth and saving all of this information into a knowledge base. So in this process, we just had to select the control geometry after loading the knowledge base onto the part file. So this is how you can, load a knowledge base and then, program, the operations from the knowledge base on family of parts or parts that requires similar type of workflow in here. Now, these knowledge bases can be used in 2, 3, 4, and 5-axis operations. The workflow for these would be similar to what we looked at. Now, I would like to point out one other nice feature in here with these knowledge bases where we can also automate the selection of these control geometries. Now in this particular step, what you noticed was after we loaded the knowledge base, we had to select the control geometries on each of these operations. Now there's a way to automate that as well, and that's something we've added in our latest version, which is version 2017. Now this feature, the knowledge base feature, is available in standard, expert, pro, and premium configurations of our product. So for folks, those of you who are working with standard, expert, pro, or premium, you could take advantage of all of these features that we are demonstrating here today. Now I'm going to go back and reload the same part in here, and you'll notice that I do not have any machining operations. And now I'm going to load up a knowledge base in here again. And you'll notice that the operations have the rules assigned to it. So as I select these operations, the machining regions or the control geometries have automatically been added. So these are what's called selection rules for machining operations, and we'll talk about that, how we can establish these selection rules to automate the selection of your control geometry as well with the knowledge base. So the knowledge base, what I loaded just now, also includes selection rules, which allows it to automatically select those control geometries. So it eliminates one additional step, saves you time in programming your machining operations by not having to edit each of these operations and specify and select control geometry. So you can see that how quickly we were able to load a part. So I'm going to just go back and show this to you again. We're going to open a part. We're going to load a knowledge base in here, and the knowledge base automatically has rules set up, so the geometries are automatically selected based on the rules, and all I got to do is right-click and regenerate, and in just 2 button clicks, you have all of your CAM operations programmed, and the geometries in here are being selected based on the selection rules. Folks, if you do have any questions, feel free to post those questions in the questions panel, and we'll do our best to answer those questions for you. Now, I'll talk about how we establish these selection rules in just a moment. I'm going to give you an example of a 3-axis programming operation where we can show you how we can tie these knowledge bases into 3-axis operations as well. Now, all of these...
Uday, I just want to interrupt. I think it's important to point out that what Uday just demonstrated, he actually demonstrated 2 things. I just wanted to recap it so our attendees are clear on what we just showed them. The first way of automation is just loading knowledge bases. So knowledge bases, all they have is parameters. Some of our users who have been with us for a while know that when we introduced knowledge bases, the reason we introduced that was to save parameters. And it was limited in the sense that you cannot save geometry. So that's what they actually showed you. The first operation or the first setup where he brought the part and loaded a knowledge base and then manually had to go in and select all the geometry in the knowledge bases. That was the first level of automation, if you can think of it that way. And then lately what we have done is we have taken the drudgery of actually manually selecting geometry out by introducing these geometry selection rules. Yeah, granted, they will have some, setup effort, upfront setup effort to set up these rules. But once you set them up, it's just a single button click if you're machining parts like what Uday just showed. So I just wanted to emphasize that we have these 2 levels of automation when we are dealing with non-feature-based machining. Thank you, Uday.